Let's talk about spells, Big B. Let's talk about D&D. Let's talk about power word spells, healing word, and command D. Let's talk about spells. Let's talk about spells. Whew, that command rhyme was bad. Alright, let's talk about Greyhawk Initiative and spells. Welcome, intrepid travelers. This is Philip, the Reasonable Game Master, and we're looking at spellcasting in Greyhawk Initiative. For anyone who doesn't want to listen to all this and just wants some optional rules and see what other people have decided regarding spellcasting in Greyhawk, I've put links down below to this Google Doc and some other people's posts about what they've been doing in their game. And so, if that's all you want, just down there, enjoy. For anyone who wants to listen to me basically just musing about what I think about the system for spellcasting and different ways to implement it, thank you for joining me for the ride. Alright, one of the first things we're going to look at, just the basic rule that Mike Morrow's offered up. And so, whenever you're going to cast a spell, you roll a d10 for your initiative. Pretty simple. It makes sense in that spells, being complex, generally would be slower. Imagining all the special hand motions, the incantations, and fiddling around with material components. This is functional, but has some balance issues. I think a lot of casters will feel like they're getting a little bit nerfed because before they could do any spell and be basically the same speed, and now they're slowest, right? And compared to range characters who are now the fastest all the time. And so that's something to consider. If your players feel like spellcasting is supposed to be complex and special and slow and it'll feel thematic for them, then it's going to be no problem. But some people more accustomed to like gameplay from MMOs, etc. might feel, well, nerfed, you know? And so, something to consider, just talk to your players and see what they like. There are lots of options to fit different playstyles, and I think you can definitely work out a reasonable combination between you all. Alright? There's also a popular set of house rules called Drew's Alternative Rules, and it's a modification. Within it, there's a modification of Mike Morrow's initiative rules. I think he calls it Dynamic Initiative, and they're pretty good. It basically takes Greyhawk Initiative and kind of flips it on its head and tries to hold on to the idea that higher is better, and so faster actions have higher dice. The fastest things have a d20, and the slowest things, spellcasting, has a d4. And so it's basically just Greyhawk Initiative kind of flipped, right? And yeah, it has the benefit that, you know, players will be able to just look at it and say, you know, higher is always better, and that's just the rule, and we don't have to learn this lower is sometimes better rule that we got from older editions. Though nostalgic players might like the idea of flipping initiative and saying that, you know, lower is better from the regular Greyhawk Initiative. So, you know, I think they're going to be fans of each system. Alright. Some other systems I've seen, and these are pretty good, and I think some people have found success for them, so they might be useful for you too. So some tables are using, basically, they choose a die to be the base for casting a spell, either d4, d6, d8, and that'll be usually the die roll they use for cantrips, and then they would also add the spell level to that as kind of basically a penalty, so higher level spells take longer to cast, and basically makes sense. Other versions, I've also heard people just using the spell level for how fast it is to cast. Kind of harkens back to older initiatives. I put links down below to some of those so you can take a look at them. And yeah, again, it's functional. Something it doesn't take into account is that a more skilled spellcaster would be able to cast spells very fast. You would think, right, if they're more skilled, they can cast the same spell a little bit faster because they're just better at it, right? Yeah, I recall an old Elminster story called Elminster at the Mage Fair, and they're having a fireball competition, the idea being that mages prove how powerful they are by comparing the size of their fireballs, which was kind of funny. And Elminster shows off by first doing an extremely elaborate fireball that's just massive, and then right after casting it, draws out the length of it, and he casts it for like a minute, and then right after that he does like an instant fireball of the same size and just show off, basically. But you know, I think it kind of makes sense. Someone who's like, you know, the most powerful wizard of the land, the most skilled wizard of the land, is going to be able to do a lot better than an apprentice, you know, or a first level spellcaster. So I kind of would prefer a system that took that into account. These are some of the spell options I've been looking at, and so it delineates the spell levels a little bit more and focuses on trying to just use a single die. And this is just an optional rule
that I thought some people might want to try at their table if they wanted to give a bonus to initiative based on spellcasting bonus, but this is kind of would go hand in hand with giving other classes bonuses based on their primary stat. So don't worry too much about that, but it's there. If you have any questions, ask them down below. I can explain a little more. But as you can see, so I made a category for word spells, as you heard in the little jingle at the beginning. I think it's a little weird that the initiative system doesn't take into account these special word spells that, like, you say one word and it casts a spell. I think those should be very fast, and they're designed to be. And so, yeah, I think they should have their own category. This might be not the way to implement it. There's different ways, and I'll talk about another way later. All right, and so again, so just this chart that tells you, if you're casting this level spell or cantrip, this is the die you use. There's an optional rule here. If the spells get much more powerful, kind of in these two ranges, 6 to 8, and then at 9th level, they're kind of very big difference from earlier levels. And so if you want to take that into account, it creates higher minimums. So minimum, you can't get lower than a 2, you can't get lower than a 3, and it kind of just creates a base difference instead of having level 9 spell being able to go as fast as anything else. With a little bit of luck. Yeah, this system is basically based kind of around how cantrip damage increases. They're like level 5, level 11, level 17. You can extra die on your cantrip, and I feel like this kind of makes sense because at these levels, it's kind of evidence that your caster's power level is kind of kicking up a notch, right? And at these levels, you get spells that are kind of especially more powerful. At 5th level, you get access to 3rd level spells such as Fireball and Lightning Bolt, and I think those are kind of powerful. Well, they're a decent distance more powerful than 1st and 2nd level attack spells. At level 11, you get access to level 6 spells. So Disintegrate is pretty massive damage, significantly more than previous level spells. And then, of course, at level 17, you get access to 9th level spells. Spell like Meteor Swarm, the damage is just massive. I think it's 40d6, and the difference, I think, makes sense that it would be kind of at a new category for complexity, and so these dice kind of reflect that. Again, remember, like, this is just how I think of it, and if you don't like it, please just don't use it. All right, and another version, this one isn't based on anything like the other one was based around the level of the cantrips. I mean, the cantrip damage increases, but it kind of feels right. So cantrip being kind of the as fast as you can get, and I think along with this, I would put maybe word spells in the same category, but you don't have to. I'll explain later why word spells, single word spells, might also take extra long and maybe fit appropriately into their level. As you can see, the dice just ascend up till level 20. And again, level 9 spells being so big, they have a very big die, and this is just very simple. As you go up 2 levels, the die also goes up. So it's very similar to adding the spell level to the die, but it just increases the size of the die as the level goes up. And it feels right. All right, something to consider is that in Mike Merle's original Greyhawk Initiative, you'd say, I'm just going to cast a spell. You roll a d10, and then when it comes to your turn, based on based on the battlefield, you can decide then what to cast. But in this one, you kind of get locked into a certain level range, and that takes away some choice, but also makes sense if you think that spells take a long time to cast, and you're going to be, taking the, 4 of your 6 seconds turn to cast a spell, and changing mid-cast would be difficult. Depends on how you feel about Magic. But another option rule I was bounced around in my head was that you declare the highest level spell you might cast. So I'm going to cast at most a 6th level spell. And then when it comes to your turn, you can change based on the battlefield situation. Like, oh, maybe I don't need to cast. I only have a Disintegrate at level 6. Maybe I need to cast something a little more utilitarian. A more utility spell. And so you would just choose, like, any lower level spell would be legal to switch to, right? The idea being it's less complex, faster, and so you can switch to anything slower, just not to anything that takes longer. And yeah, and so the last thing I want to look at is some special cases and exceptions. And so, as I talked about in the jingle at the beginning, well, as I sung about the jingle in the beginning, I was going to talk about these word spells, and these word spells kind of have a long history going back to older editions, and I believe that the people who designing the spells wanted something very fast and useful for a wizard to cast against his enemies, especially in a situation where maybe you're being attacked by a swordsman and you need something quick that he can't interrupt, and interrupting was like a big issue back in the day. And so, yeah, there were these one-word spells that they designed that they had an effect that could be achieved at lower level, but they were limited because they only affected the person based on their hit point total, if they had to have below a certain hit point total. And of course, it was a high level spell, right? And so that was kind of the balance, right? You get to cast something really fast, but it's got these limitations. And so I think the system should really, whatever system people use, should take this into account, because otherwise it really takes away a lot of the flavor. In older editions, when they had spell timing being equal to the level of the spell, these would still be one time cost. And so they would be as fast as a level 1 spell, basically. And there's some other variants you could also do. Some tables have been saying that if it's a bonus action, it doesn't affect your initiative, right? The idea being it's free, it's a bonus action, so why should it take you longer, right? And that's just kind of goes against the ideology of bonus actions. And actually, Mike Morales kind of addresses this in the video where he talks about Greyhawk Initiative. And he talks about how bonus actions are starting to get in the way because they're making interactions between certain new rules or different classes a little bit weird, and how yes, a solution for that would be to change the way bonus actions work and just have a special action that gives you the bonus action as part of the action, and then you wouldn't have to worry about bonus actions at all. I'll probably make another video on that, because I think that's an interesting idea. So again, another variant is a reason that power word spells might take longer to cast, right? You imagine, if you think like Harry Potter, right? Avada Kedavra is kind of like a power word kill, but a reason that a power word might take a long time to use is you might need to gather the spell energy within yourself to cast it before you say the word. And that would make sense for keeping power word spells at their level. And so you'd have to decide how you feel about that. Yeah. Oh, and some other things. Let's see. More exceptions. And I wrote some other stuff, but not super useful. If you want to read it, again, it's linked down below. And here we come to just some other situations where the speed of spells matters. And so casting spells from scrolls. The rule I would use, and you can do different ways, but I would say that it's one size smaller if you already know the spell, right? So there's the magic is casted onto that piece of paper, that scroll already. And so it should be easier to cast it than if you had it in your head, because you don't have to use the components, you don't have to do the motions. It's already been kind of built into the scroll. And if you don't know the spell, then you're trying to decipher something that you don't know about, and I think it would be slower in that situation if you were casting from a spell you didn't know from a scroll. And then spell stored items like rings of spell storing. I think just a d4, like a range attack or a cantrip. This is very fast. The spell has already been cast and then stored in the spell, and so it just makes sense they would be very quick. I think spell-like abilities should probably be similar to that. The last thing, I didn't write this down, but spell interruption, I feel like concentration covers that, and I think I would just say that the player needs to make a concentration check if they get hit before they cast, in order to cast higher than a cantrip. The original rule is that you can't cast, if you get hit, you can't cast higher than a cantrip, which is reasonable. It's a reasonable choice and simple, right? But I think to be kind of kinder to spellcasters, I think giving them a concentration check to avoid being forced into a cantrip would work a little bit better. Again, decide at your table. And yeah, just thanks for watching. Sorry that kind of meandered on, and I don't know how you feel about me doing this screen capture. It's a little bit like doing a bad PowerPoint. But I'm experimenting with things. And again, thanks for watching. And yeah, I'm really enjoying making these videos, if only just to get all of this stuff out of my head that I've been thinking about basically since Mike Merle's released this. So it's a little bit of a passion project, but I hope it'll be useful to some people. So again, thank you for watching, and remember, be reasonable and have fun.